Well, hi everyone. I'm Monica, and I'm the tech facilitator for this session. So I will stop talking very soon. But yeah, so this is the what is DBR? What is Design-Based Research session, which is an expertise connection session. And it's designed to have leaders in the circles community with expertise on a topic to share information and examples with participants who want to learn more about DBR, provide a forum for participants to discuss how might they want to incorporate DBR into their work, and then also broker connections between community members around the topic. So yeah, as we go through this session, I hope you all get a chance to learn and think about what to take to the strategy sessions tomorrow, where we start to make plans for how we can, remake broadening. So yeah, and for a quick introduction, I'm a doctoral student and I'm currently at Teachers College, Columbia University. And I will turn it over to Jody, who is going to start. Yeah.
Hi, you guys see my slides?
Yes,
I've never learned how to do present view on slides with Zoom, so you're just gonna see
Jody, I just wonder if everybody else could introduce themselves first, maybe, since we have a
Sure.
smallish group.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think we can go around the room very quickly,
Okay,
maybe.
let me
Yeah,
stop
before-
sharing so you can see everybody.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so maybe I'll just call on someone and then the next person calls on someone. So our three speakers are Jody, Andy, and Vitali. But yeah, maybe I'll just call on Jennifer to introduce yourself really quickly first.
Awesome. Okay, first to go. Hi, Jennifer Cross. I'm a research assistant professor at Tufts University, just up a little bit from the Turk folks. Actually, I have some folks that I work with at Turk, so I feel like, oh, these are like all new Turk people. But I work at the Center for Engineering Education and Outreach. So I do engineering education research. I look at robotics and all sorts of cool stuff. We have a new Redl project that was just funded this round that's just barely started. So
Thanks. And Jennifer, can you choose someone else here?
See, I will say Sam.
Sorry, I had to find my unmute button. So I'm Sam Samantha Emerson. I am a postdoc at Boys Town National Research Hospital. My background is in cognitive psychology, with my research focus being in language and learning abilities, especially in second language acquisition, and individuals with developmental language disorder. And I am currently in the process of pivoting to get more involved with the development of digital learning products. So this seemed like a very relevant topic to sort of get more involved in that. So I guess I will popcorn over to Kun Wang.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, everyone. I'm Kun. I'm from UMass Dartmouth. This is my third year of my doctoral program. So I'm just at the very start level by finishing my qualifier exam and preparing for my dissertation. So this is where I am. And my interest is teacher knowledge. So what I am doing right now with my advisor is trying to develop some items for teachers' knowledge, and we're using the CK and PCK theory as our framework. And I heard about Turk because I live in Boston right now. I heard about Turk for a long time, and this is my first time to see people from Turk in some other places. I'm very excited. Yeah, that's me. So I think I'm just calling the person next to me. So it's that Andy. Sorry if I pronounce your name.
Me.
wrong. Yeah.
Are you talking? Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I'm one of the presenters. I'm Andy Rubin from Turk. I'm a math and data science educator, and you'll hear more about me in a few minutes. And I will call on Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandy Katz. I'm with the Learning Research and Development Center, University of Pittsburgh. I've been developing natural language intelligent tutoring systems for quite a while. My previous domain was physics, but we have a new project under Cyber Learning and Work to develop a tablet-based tool that paramedic students and other students in the health sciences can use to conduct sessions on their own and receive automated feedback during a debriefing. So I think we're doing design-based research, but I'm not sure. So I came to this session to learn more about it. We work a lot with paramedic instructors and students in designing our system. We're in the first year, just starting our second actually, and I'm hoping to get some tips on things to look at further. So let's see who else. Jennifer, did you talk yet? Okay, so Vitali?
Sure. Yeah, you also will hear from me because I'm one of the presenters, but very nice to meet everyone. I'm an assistant professor at the medical school and the School of Information at the University of Michigan. And we'll be happy to share what we do with DBR. Yeah. Did we cover everybody? Oh, we have Ibrahim.
Oh, there's several more. Yeah.
Please.
Hi, I'm Raheem Dahlstrom-Hockey, and I happen to be in the same room as Jody and Andy, so I figured I'd join the conversation. Yeah, somehow we all have.
We all fit in the lobby of Turk.
So obviously I work at Turk. I have a background in cognitive psychology, and my work focuses on looking at supporting neurodiverse learners, particularly using technology to support the STEM learning of neurodiverse learners. And I guess I'll call on another Turk person, Tian.
Yeah, I should join them in the lobby. So Tian Edwards, I work with Jody and Brahim on a couple of different projects, that one of which I know Jody will be talking about later. And then a virtual reality project, which I think is what she's calling number 2, both targeting neurodiverse learners using various forms of technology. And I was not here, so I have no idea who has not yet spoken. Apologies for being late.
About Nicholas.
Nicholas, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick. I'm a faculty member at the Carnegie Mellon Human Computer Interaction Institute. And I'm a PI on a new REDL project looking at how people learn how to collaborate with AI design agents. And I'm really interested in understanding how this community does design-based research. I myself am a designer and do a lot of design research, maybe in different contexts. So excited to hear about things from the learning context.
So we have Zach and Deb Sheila.
Hi, I'm Deb Sheila. I'm a research scientist at OpenStack's Rice University. We are currently working on building a research infrastructure that would allow us to connect researchers to student users of existing OpenStack's products. And for this project specifically, I'm trying to learn more about design-based research so that we can build it out into our product roadmap.
Zach's unable to speak right now, and everybody else is circled. Do you guys want to chat? Any guys want to chat? Should I get going?
Yes, you should get going.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Jody.
Sure. So as I was saying, I don't know how to do Zoom and slides, so you're going to see all my slides. But so I am the director of the Educational Gaming Environments Group at Turk. And for the past 12 years or so, we've been looking at how games can reach new audiences with in new ways for STEM learning. And when we look at design research, for me, it's all about the research question. It's about, what we're looking at features that show some promise. We're not looking at efficacy. It's different than, establishing the efficacy. We're looking at things that show promise, but for a specific type of learning or for a specific audience and under specific conditions. So we keep our projects very focused, even though they're open-ended and emergent. We don't know what we're going to see all the time. We try to keep them focused on those specific constraints. And the two outcomes for design research are both the design part. How does this help us improve this product or this material, this experience for these learners, for these conditions? And also, how can these findings be generalized to help advance the knowledge of the research community? Both those are key components of design research in our perspective. And what's not common, I think, amongst at least my talk and the others, or even amongst study after study of ours, are the methods that we use. Our methods are very nimble and creative to be able to ask those questions. So, however, they do need to be constrained and consistent with the research question. We focus on ones that are observable and measurable, so we can get empirical findings, and that are appropriate to the audience at hand. So those are our general guiding principles. And now I'm just going to go quickly through two examples of this, of two different projects. One is the including neurodiversity and foundational applied computational thinking. So we've brought together people, leaders in computational thinking and in special education and cognitive psychology, and putting, I'm not even going to go into the reasons why, that's a whole nother conversation, but leveraging the overlap between these two and figuring out what types of scaffolds for executive function will reveal the power of computational thinking for neurodiverse learners. We think of neurodiversity with an asset and a differences perspective, that's assets and deficits. And so we try to scaffold the deficits while revealing the assets. Tian, who's involved very much in this project and the next, has expressed, goes the not about us, without us. And we believe strongly in studying our audience, not only as participants, but as co-designers with us. And we also, our teams specializes in using the back-end data from digital interactives to be able to look at different ways to do assessment. And that in itself is a design research question, because well, first of all, let me go back to the first part. When we work with design with neurodiverse learners, we'll sit them down with a game and have something like a think aloud or just a conversation about what they need. And this is a game, Zumbinis, that Turk, many of you probably know from Turk's collection. And in here, kids said, I can solve the puzzle, I just lose track of the information. So they just wanted something for their working memory to help keep track of their information. We're not giving them any hints or anything. It's just about keeping their information. So we work with them. They also wanted one for highlighting attention, and we built that too. And we also use the back-end data to come up with innovative assessments. And the reason why I just wanted to show this is it's rigorous. We have 70 participants. We do inter-rater reliability on hand labeling before we ever build any automated detectors. And so this is another design research method, but it has rigor, even though it's innovative and emergent. I can talk more about these at length, but I don't have time. So I'm going to go. The other project I just wanted to give you a glimpse into is Tian and Ibrahim work on. Tian leads, which is looking at VR for neurodiverse and in particular learners with autism, and looking at their sensory and attention and social needs. And so what features show promise to meet these needs and include them in a STEM experience? And they've done co-design with some students from Landmark College, which is an institute that Ibrahim used to work at, that's for learners with learning differences, and university age or college age students. And they worked with some of these designers doing all kinds of brainstorming. This is in a collection of using something called Miro board, which is a digital brainstorming tool that they were able to do, collecting artwork, looking, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in this middle panel, they were voting on the different parts of artwork. And Tian just gave a talk earlier about how the artwork that their sketch work actually morphed into the real digital assets that they're using in their experience. So that's an example of co-design. And this next, then when they actually knew their questions about sensory and attention and the sensory and attention questions, they had to figure out about hue, color of the scenes, brightness, and the clutter, the amount of clutter on the screen. So they did a series of like 600 or 700 slides kids would go through, picking, it's like the eye doctor test, yes or no, which one do you like better, which one do you like better? And aggregating all these data together, they were able to see trends on which of these ones had variation, which are important, which ones people had a strong preference for, and that's how they're ending up crafting their visual experience. So those are just two very brief examples of how to be very inclusive and targeted to your audience for specific research questions. That's where we are. You can ask more questions. I think what we're going to do, if you have a quick clarifying question now, can address it, but while Vitaly, I think you're going next, or Andy. But we're going to have a discussion. If we go quickly, we'll have time for general questions later.
Yeah. Think about your clarifying questions while I will start doing my presentation.
Thank you, Wendy, for your yay.
All right, let me see. Yeah, can everybody see it? Perfect.
Yep.
All right, then, yeah, we'll make sure that we have questions, time for questions towards the end. So I will present the project NSF funded called Aprende. First, the question: who knows what Aprende mean in Spanish?
To learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's good, because that's to some extent related, as language is being part of this, fund of knowledge or the superpower. But briefly, so as you can see, it's definitely a multi-site, multi-collaboration project, a lot of people involved, with working with just 8 middle school teachers. And the motivation, which very much aligned with the keynote speaker. So it's assumed that that low-income students of color fail in school because such students and their families experience deficiencies that obstruct the learning process. So we decided to approach and use DBR in a more holistic way that will include recognizing that the students and the communities as holders and creators of knowledge. So we, coming from this asset-based perspectives, so we decided to work with teachers to create more culturally responsive engineering education. So in essence, so we worked with 8 middle school teachers at a STEAM school, Tier 1, near US-Mexican border, actually in San Diego. You can actually see Mexico from where the school is. So we've been working with teachers for over 3 years, I want to say. It's our fourth year. And each semester, teachers were asked to design or co-design, I would say, together with us, a unit that would include the principles of funds of knowledge, which I will tell you exactly what it means, and engineering design process. So that was our intervention. And in rough terms, funds of knowledge, it's individuals historically accumulated set of abilities, so strategies, experiences, or bodies of knowledge that use for household well-being, or sometimes for the survival of the community. So it goes beyond than just simple prior knowledge or domain-specific prior knowledge, which was kind of misconceptions for most of the teachers when we started working on this project. And I'm assuming that most of you are very much familiar with engineering design process, so we'll skip that part. So what you see is basically that's our theory of change, so to say. Oh, hold on a second. We missed this part, the heart of it actually, where the DBR comes in. So in this work, we very much relied on Bill Sandoval's work. And I like how he talks about the design research, which looking at the functions and not necessarily at the effects. So in my mind, it's more looking at this kind of the mediators of the learning process. And there are 4 principles or 4 epistemic commitments of DBR. So theory-driven, practically applied, generating design principles and implemented in an iterative manner. And I will deconstruct the first 2 commitments and the way how we applied it to apprehend the project. So the first one is we need to address the learning problem that must advance the theory of learning. So in our case, our question that we try to answer is whether becoming aware of funds of knowledge and eliciting those funds of knowledge and applying them to engineering design by both teachers and students. So we have these 2 targets, teachers and students, that we're in this project, that produce beneficial outcomes that are associated not only with understanding of engineering design process. So teaching engineering design process together with funds of knowledge is beneficial. So that was the learning problems that we kind of trying to address. But on the second part, so a learning problem must aim to improve student learning outcomes. So in that sense, we are targeting students' interest in and knowledge of engineering. So all of it was in service to these 2 learning outcomes. And so that's our kind of theory of change. And in this diagram, you can see that indeed the teachers as actors of change. And as I told you, that every year, every teacher was asked to deliver at least 1 or 2 units. So every time they would deliver, would measure, then regroup. Not only the teachers would improve the units, but also we will calibrate and see where those barriers or opportunities. And since I don't have a lot of time, but I will just share a couple of things that what was kind of we discovered in this iteration cycle. The first one is, so some teachers, they when in their interviews, they will talk about acknowledging the linguistic practices of students in the classroom, while at the same time, they will continue correcting students when they started to speak Spanish, so to say. And they have the whole notion of good and bad Spanish. But when they will talk with us, we'll say, no, it's definitely, speaking of language, and it's definitely a part of the funds of knowledge, and it is a superpower that students bring to the classroom. Another was quite surprising to me when teachers talking about engineering and some sort of this elite profession. So what students, when they were designing or tinkering, they said, no, that's not engineering. So that was another aspect. Another one was teaching to the standards. So it was kind of the idea that it was not possible to breach the home knowledge and the classroom content. So we have to work towards the standards And this is all kind of these extras that we don't know how to accommodate. But in the, overall, this idea of funds of knowledge, definitely a lot of teachers kind of acknowledge that that students are not a blank slates. So this breaks the idea of students. So it's not that they don't know anything. And another one, kind of on, again, reflecting on the design-based research in the Apprenda project. The three important elements. First, kind of internally in our PI team. So we have the professors from bilingual education, engineering, and the learning sciences. So internally, it was quite interesting how we kind of were able to collaborate, and then in addition to that, collaborate with those 8 teachers. So DBR requires these collaborations to persist for an extended period of time. So that's one thing. When you engage in DBR, it's not something that you do very quickly. It definitely requires a commitment. Resource intensive, especially in this project. But my advice would be kind of to identify a priori how specific data streams, whether you know the classroom observations or interviews or surveys, how all this kind of map up to the evidence the necessary to address your theoretical or practical objectives. So you need to know kind of in advance how all of these streams will map up to your with your objectives. And for us, it's very important to understand it's not a randomized controlled trial. So this is the DBR is definitely allows you to this flexibility to modify your instructional tools midstream to account for this kind of unanticipated factors, to ensure that you can kind of retain your methodological alignment with underlying theory and predicting your learning outcomes. So that's the takeaways. So again, if you have some kind of clarifying questions right now, I'm happy to answer, but if not, we can keep it towards the end. And I will pass it to Andy.
Any questions for now? Well, I see we have a few more people, so welcome to new people. Maybe we'll get around to additional introductions after I do my presentation. So actually, Vitali's presentation was a perfect segue to mine, even though we did not necessarily organize it that way. So thank you. And I'm going to do my slideshow here. Okay. In Vitali's description of DBR, he talked about a paper. Whoops, it's saying that it's paused. Can you guys, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, all right. Let me go back to the beginning. He mentioned a paper by Bill Sandoval.
I'm sorry. It's actually not updating. I think if it's paused, it means it shows the last thing. So I think if you click into PowerPoint again, it should unpause and go green.
No, it's not.
Do you want to
hold on. Let me try this. That's really funny. It says bring my shared window to the front, which I thought it was. All right, hold on. Somehow, maybe it's, let me try this. So what are you seeing? Are you seeing my first page, my first slide?
Yeah.
And now are you seeing my second slide?
No.
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 You see your whole PowerPoint interface, like the editor interface.
Oh dear.
Can you just click on the on number 2?
Yeah, but let me stop sharing and reshare. I think that might work. Is this any better?
Well, now it looks more like a presentation and not your.
How's that? Did that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Always restart.
Okay. Well, you don't need to see that first slide. It was just me. Okay, so I actually, in preparation for this, went back and read the Sandoval 2014 paper, and I have a reference to it at the end. And I will recommend that you all read it. It's only about 15 pages long, but it's one of the most insightful and densest papers I've read. But I think it's a really good introduction, both to design-based research, but also to how in the world do you actually do this? How do you keep track of what you're finding out, what your theoretical commitments are, and what your practical goals are? So just to go back to what DBR's commitments are, there are two commitments, one being to practical improvement, but the other also to theoretical refinement. And I think what people often remember about DBR is the second point of their cycles of design, enactment, analysis, and revision. And I've often read proposals where people say, well, we're going to do design and then revise, so we're doing DBR. But I think what's important is to say that DBR also has this theoretical component, that we have to acknowledge that any design is informed by ideas about how learning happens, and that any kind of research that involves cycles of design should also be contributing to theoretical understanding. And that's very tricky. And after DBR was originally proposed about 10 to 15 years ago, there is actually a lot of pushback about how this wasn't rigorous. And Bill Sandoval's article is actually in conversation with those criticisms and saying, well, here's a way that we can actually make it more rigorous. And a piece of that is linking the processes of enactment to the outcomes. So really understanding what the whole range of design through outcomes is based on. And what Bill talks about is a conjecture map. And I'm going to describe conjecture maps. It's not that they're the only way of keeping track of what goes on in DBR, but I think it's really good hygiene, in a sense, research hygiene, to have something like this in a DBR project. So it's a way of keeping track of design conjectures, the evidence that is being accumulated, and then how the theoretical understanding is evolving. And I like this quote from Sandoval. It's a way of having a research team's commitments to what it sees as the most important design problem to be solved, and its initial ideas of the important questions to ask. So I am going to show you what, so I'm sorry, I took this as a, I know it's a little fuzzy, but I had to take it as a screenshot from the paper. And there's a lot to unpack here, but which I'm not going to do in a lot of detail, but basically the way he lays it out is that you start with a high-level conjecture about how to support learning in some context. And I will say to Jody's comment, possibly for a particular class of learners, although often we don't know who our learners are. And if you have that conjecture, then you create a learning environment that has certain tools and materials. And that's often where we focus is, we're designing a curriculum. But when you're in a classroom, there are also task structures. What are we asking students to do with these materials? Are we asking them to do it by themselves or with other people? How is conversation being added into the picture? And then what kinds of discursive practices or disciplinary practices are part of the whole picture of what goes on in a classroom? The mediating processes can be seen in two ways. One is through the artifacts that students produce, and the other is through interactions. So this says something about the methodology that you need to use in DBR. So you need to be collecting what students create and inferring from them what they did, and or be observing students actually doing the task so that you understand what interactions they're going through. And again, you start with a map like this and say what you think they're going to be, and then you collect the data and you discover that you were wrong. in general. You were probably right on some of it and wrong on some other things. And then only after you think about all of those do you think about what are the outcomes. And our outcomes are usually some kind of learning, possibly something about interest or motivation. If I think about the keynote, I would certainly want to put something here about identity. And so this is a hard job, but this is really the heart of DBR in my mind, is to actually think through your entire design based on a high-level conjecture, and then going through these steps until you think about what your outcomes are going to be. And Sandoval also points out that the processes that, the functions, I think is the word that Vitaly used, that take you from embodiment to mediating processes are conjectures about what impact a design will have. And the processes that go from the mediating processes to the outcomes are also theoretical conjectures about how learning is produced by these mediating processes. I have a bit of an example here, but I'm also aware of the fact that I think I've already been talking for 10 minutes. So, somebody tell me if I have 3 more minutes though to go through this quick example. Monica, what do you think?
Yeah, maybe you could go through this example quickly and then we can move on to Q&A.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll do it really quickly. So I've most recently used conjecture mapping in a project called the Embeds Project, where we're trying to add data excursions with raw scientific data to a biology unit on the Serengeti ecosystem. And here's our overall conjecture, that analyzing real data with an appropriate computer tool will support students' scientific understanding and their data fluency. So that's what we started with. We have a very complicated conjecture map, but I want to just point out the task structures here. This is the original conjecture map, and the task structures that we put in that map, that original map, were kind of vanilla: planning and conducting data-driven investigations, interrogating given data sets, and evaluating current scientific models against evidence. And before we even got into the classroom, as we went through the curriculum design, we realized that there were more things we needed to add to the task structures. And so here is a revised conjecture map where we called out the fact that we needed a data excursion routine. So we actually have routines that teachers get used to and are able to use flexibly. And they actually are also routines for curriculum writers. But we changed these task structures into routines that get used multiple times through the curriculum. So just in going back to the conjecture map, and keeping that as our kind of touchstone, we've been keeping track of changes over the course of even developing the curriculum, and then we expect we'll be developing more changes as we get data from the classroom. And here is the reference. Again, as you can see, it's less than 20 pages, but it's chock full of really good insights about DBR. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. I mean, we're going to open it right now to Q&A. Feel free to just unmute yourself, ask a question, or write in the chat, then we'll get to your question. Yeah. And it also could be a discussion, not necessarily just a question. Yeah.
So I have questions for Andy, but well, I'll ask them, but prioritize other ones if they come forward. So I have 2. One is, do your outcome, you mentioned, you talked about how it always ends up in the outcomes. And I wondered if the outcomes ever drive the design. Like that used to be a backwards design, you know, and the backwards design, that was so that was one. And also I love the way that you talked about how using this tool gave you a sort of like historical document. And I wondered if you ever put all the different saved documents together and watched the trajectory through the document.
So the answer to the second question is not yet. This is actually the first time I've done DBR for many years, and this is the best I have done in terms of documenting. So I have not been as good in the past. And I credit my colleague and co-PI, Bill Penuel, because he is very good at this. And so he has enforced this, and I'm very happy. So we haven't done that yet. The first question, I think that the outcomes are kind of in the conjecture anyway, because we were saying, so the conjecture was that having students interact with raw data would increase their understanding of science and their data fluency. So in a way, the outcomes, at least at that broad level, are already in the statement of the conjecture, but the outcomes are more than what are observable.
Right.
So then you have to put in, what are your instruments? How are you going to measure understanding of scientific ideas and data fluency? So, so they're very, very tied together. But the outcomes column is more for what are the measurable, what instruments are you using, and what are the measurable outcomes. That help? Did that answer that question?
So I have a question, and it relates back to Andy's presentation as well. But I'm thinking I probably am having a little bit of proactive interference from coming from an academic background and interpreting what you mean by the term rigor. So especially, you know, coming from our PhD programs and all the training, it's embedded in us that you set the idea before you even start, and then you don't change it, right? So I think I see how these maps can contribute towards rigor, but can you speak a little bit more about ensuring the rigor of the research? And I'd like to also hear from the other two speakers on your opinions on rigor as well.
I'm happy to let somebody else speak first, and then I will see what I can do. Or I think there may be people in the audience who have thoughts about it too. But I'm curious what other people think as well.
I'm just going to say briefly, that's exactly why I asked that question about the outcomes, because to me, those outcomes stay pretty sacrosanct, at least on a broad level, and drive more. But but with iteration in the way that Andy was talking about, but that is part of it. And then it's just be careful what you say. Does it show promise, or is it actually showing effect? You know, and you don't show effect without N and power and, you know, and all the things that are not necessarily associated with this kind of design research.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in because, you know, I come from a cognitive psychology background, so I know exactly what you mean with the rigor question. And I think when we approach it from a design research basis, you're not going to collect samples large enough to get statistically significant results in a tightly controlled lab study. That's not happening. On the other hand, you do want to use a systematic approach that you apply uniformly and sort of learn from and adapt from. So the idea is to improve design, right? You're not testing whether or not this intervention works. You're figuring out how to keep designing and iterating to end up with a design after several cycles. And often when we do that, at the end, you want to run an efficacy study where you do your best to control extraneous variables. You do try to get a large enough sample to get a statistically significant result. And that's when you're actually testing whether this this design that has gone through several iterations of design-based research where you've collected evidence and acted on it, but have not done so, you know, with large samples every single time. You know, but at the end of the day, did you end up with a product that achieves the outcomes or goals that you set out to achieve?
I would also say that, you know, thinking about the keynote and this idea and then the panel discussion after, we are the community who gets to decide what is rigor, right? So if we want to be the change that we want to see, then we need to open our brains and our minds and our hearts and our, you know, everything, community, to saying what we think is rigorous. And it's not about ends always. Sometimes it's about depths. Sometimes it's about who was able to contribute, you know, thinking of the neurodiverse learners. I mean, you know, did we hear from the neurodiverse learners, and did they feel like they made a difference in what the, you know, game is that they're going to be able to do? I mean, Reddle, just to, you know, hone in on this particular program, is all about being exploratory, right? They only have exploratory things. This is our opportunity to be scholars of things that are testing out the boundaries of what meaning is, what rigor is, what is really having an impact. And we're the people who will be reviewing the proposals and submitting the proposals. And we should hold our community accountable for pushing on those things. Because sometimes you, especially neurodiverse learners, it's very hard. I work with neurodiverse learners in New York City, and the N, we can never get an N that's, you know, that we're going to have enough people to get the P values that we want, but it doesn't mean we don't do it, right? So that's just the way I feel.
Yeah. A passionate plea. Thank you, Wendy.
And also the instruments you use to measure and the methods you use to measure may not exist for the type of measurement you're trying to do. And so how do you even do efficacy studies in that case? So there has to be design research to try to get to a point that we have instruments. That's what I would show in that very 15-second brief thing about implicit assessments and doing sort of hand labeling and automating assessments. It's about getting to a whole new way of measurement, which takes design research.
And can I also respond to the, I may have given a sense that these conjecture maps are just like, oh, well, you can change them any old time and it doesn't matter, which is not the case. I do think that the outcomes, if you're going to say, oh, we didn't get the outcome we wanted, so we'll just substitute the one we got, that's not fair either. And I think part of I think accountability was also a word that came up a lot in the keynote, that the reason that you keep a history of conjecture maps is that you have evidence attached to the changes of the conjecture map. So if someone comes and says, wait a minute, you just changed that, why? You need to have an argument and evidence and a warrant for it. So I think there's also rigor in the connection between evidence and action that was based on that evidence. So again, I don't know other people, it's a really interesting question, and I think you'll really enjoy the paper because it's exactly what Sandoval was trying to figure out, and he's much smarter about it than I am.
And again,
question. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I just was going to say, it's not finding the effects, it's finding the functions. So it's more about why and how. If you're able to tap into this question, you got it. It's not like, oh, I found this effect, it works, but how it works. And that's, I guess, that's the heart of it. Sorry, Jennifer, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. So I've tried some DBR before, and I've even attempted to read, as you said, a very dense Sandoval's paper. And the way that I always find myself using the conjecture map is either at the beginning of a project, trying to lay it out and kind of using it like a documentation for a hypothesis, or at the end as like the deliverable, like, oh, here's what we came up with. And so I've always kind of like a couple, like, let's let you debug my issues here with like what I've hit with DBR, which is like, I definitely struggle how to find like a meaningful way to use that as like you're describing in the middle. And so like what kind of information, like you're saying you're taking like better documentation, Andy, like, and everyone, like how are you using that in the middle of the project? And then kind of complement, not necessarily complement, but kind of similar to this issue, and I can think this maybe for all speakers, I also found it to be in some ways not restrictive, but you know, when you're going into a co-design experience and you're trying to remain open to the, you know, the changes in direction you might be getting from, you know, the students or, you know, the learners or the participants that you're working with as co-designers, how do you work that in with the structure, I guess, of the conjecture mapping? So.
Well, I can tell you what we did in this project because it is a co-design project. So, and in answer to your first question, I think the part I find particularly challenging, and this is why I'm happy that I have a co-PI who's better at this than I am, is finding the right level of description, because it can be so general as to be like, we're going to have discourse in the classroom. Well, yeah, that's not really useful. But on the other hand, you don't want it to be so specific that you're saying these are the questions students will answer, because those are going to change. So I think one of the tricky parts, and he doesn't talk about this at all in the paper, is how do you get that level of description that's actually powerful and not so little that it's going to change all the time, and not so high that it's never going to change. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I just want to acknowledge that I think that is an issue. What we did with co-design teachers is we just did a bunch of co-design. We didn't share the conjecture map with them. And then the team kind of went back to the conjecture map several months later and said, okay, we just went through this whole messy process with teachers and co-design. Let's go back to our conjecture map and see how do we reflect on it now that we've just gone through this process. And that's where we came to those routines, because the teachers say, hey, I need like a way to structure my interactions with data sets. If we're going to do it 5 times, I want a routine. I said, oh, of course. So then we can put that into the conjecture map. So I find that you don't want to look at it every day. You want to look at it like a couple times a year. That's at least what we've done.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Andy. I see that we have 2 minutes left to the session, but yeah, thank you for to the 3 speakers. I wanted to take the last 2 minutes to close it out. I have a few announcements to make also, and this is from the organizing committee. So we are going to do our welcome and announcement sessions now. And to get to it, so you go back to swap card and look at the agenda, and it should be there for you at 5. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern, there will be a bunch of interactive sessions, starting with a morning welcome and a couple of important short talks from NSF leaders. Then there will be the gallery walk. And if you haven't already, use Swapcart tonight to scope out the posters and demos in the gallery and sign up for the sessions that you want to attend. And while you're there, you should check out everything that we have scheduled for tomorrow. And then also please note that we have an optional after hours gathering in Wonder, which will start at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. Pacific, and it'll run for 1.5 hours. It's informal, so feel free to just drop by, say hi, meet new people. The Wonder platform is different from Zoom or Swapcard, but you should check it out. And if you can't make it, don't worry, but come back again at 10 a.m. tomorrow Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern. So these are the announcements. Yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone. Want to end on time. Please stay connected, stay in touch with each other. Yeah. Anything else? Any last words from the speakers?
Thank you, Monica.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Circles, and
All right.
thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.